Hi there. Today I'll be unpacking a principle that I share in my latest book called Freedom. But before I share and go into this principle, let me first create the context. A few years ago, while my wife was pregnant with my first son, Caleb, she experienced extreme pain. And after the doctors did a few tests, they discovered that a fibroid was attached to her ovary. Now, because her ovary was in close proximity to her appendix, the doctors weren't certain whether the inflammation was caused by the fibroid or by appendicitis. Now, appendicitis is a condition in which the appendix becomes inflamed, and that causes pain. Whenever possible, surgery is avoided on a pregnant woman in order to minimize complications on the mother and the child. Now, if the inflammation was caused by the fibroid, then the doctors could reduce the inflammation without surgery. However, if the inflammation was caused by appendicitis, then surgery would be required because surgery would prevent the appendix from rupturing. Now, a year before the situation, a good friend of mine had appendicitis, and while he was in hospital, his appendix ruptured and he passed away. Now, this was fresh on my mind while I was going through the situation with my wife. And then I started praying. I said, Lord, please show me what to do. Show us what to do. As the priest of my home, everything is dependent on my ability to hear your voice. And then after I prayed that prayer, probably one of the few times that I heard the Lord speak to me audibly. Now, this is actually the principle that I want to share with you today. And he said the following: Nigel, don't put your trust in your ability to hear my voice. Instead, put your trust in my ability to make myself heard by you. In other words, hearing God's voice is not dependent on my ability. It is dependent on God's ability to make himself heard by me. Or it's dependent on God to ensure that I get the message. And when this truth sunk in, a peace of God that transcended human understanding came upon me, because I realized, you know what? It's not dependent on me to get the message. It's dependent on God to ensure that I get the message. And immediately I started thinking about the prophet Balaam in the Old Testament, the false prophet Balaam. He had no desire to hear the voice of the Lord. He had no desire to do the will of the Lord. And yet God made sure that he heard him, even if he had to speak through his donkey. God literally spoke through his donkey so that he could get the message. Now, if God made sure that he was heard by a backslidden prophet that didn't have any desire to hear his voice and to do his will, how much more you and I, who actually have a desire to do the will of God, how much more will he make sure that we get the message? And when I realized this, when my mind and my soul was filled with this revelation, man, I felt so excited, so at peace, so at rest. So after my prayer, the doctors decided to do a few more tests, and they discovered that Zuline did not have appendicitis. God made himself heard through the test results. Consequently, because she didn't have appendicitis, she didn't require surgery, and therefore she and Caleb were safe. So I want to encourage you with this principle. Don't put your trust in your ability to hear God's voice. Put your trust in his ability to make himself heard by you. What I just shared is covered in greater detail in my latest book called Freedom. If you are interested in purchasing it, you are welcome to get all the details in the description.